This is Jamaica. This is my country. A son of this island, a daughter of this land. Fearless of fear, I stand in awe. Only love prevails, secured in God's hands. This is Jamaica, where joy cometh in the morn, surrounded by mystic waters, crashing upon the shores where only heroes are born. Only if you knew Jamaica as well as I do, then you would utter, I love you, Jamaica. God knows I do. This is Jamaica, a simple speck in the universe. Our hearts beat and pulse in every nation, but only second to the kingdom of God. We put Jamaica first. I am Jamaican, regardless of where you may find me. Black, green, and gold is the marrow in my bones. So if I die away from my island, I pray to God you'll take me home.
It is that time of the week once again when we focus on our special feature. This is Jamaica, which started out as a poem by Peter Gracie, and that evolved into a poetry scholarship competition created for students to explore poetry as an educational building block, and the hope is to inspire and motivate students to express themselves freely through poetry created by Peter Gracie. We've been featuring individuals from across the diaspora in this feature, as part of this feature, hearing their stories and having them bring to bear on the discussions their own experience and expertise. And this week, we're very happy to have joining us public speaker, certified life and mindset coach, Mr. Wayne Dawson. Greetings, Wayne Dawson. How are you?
Greetings, Dervan. I'm well, thank you. Thank you for having me this afternoon. How are you?
I am fine, thanks. Pleasure to have you joining us on both sides of the story here on Power 106 FM during our This is Jamaica feature. First of all, let's hear your story in as succinct and as simple a way as you're able to convey and to tell that story. What's your story, Wayne Dawson?
Well, I'm a Jamaican son who was raised in an environment where my family, my parents, encouraged that we shouldn't, as children, be quiet. We always had a voice. And so we were always encouraged at the dining table to speak up and to speak the truth. And one of the things that I remember as I was going through school, I went to Arden, graduated, went to Wilmers. One of the things that kept me up and had me even to college when I got here to the United States was the poem, "The heights of great men reach and kept were not attained by sudden flight, but they, while their companions slept, were toiling upward through the night." Are you familiar with that particular
Absolutely, absolutely.
And so I do know go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. You go ahead, please.
I do know that for me, words are very, very potent, very important. In fact, most of the kids that we engage can tell you from start to finish the lyrics of most popular songs. They will be able to write on the spot their own lyrics and recite these lyrics. We know the importance of words. Words can destroy you. Words can sustain you. And words can elevate you as well. And so in terms of the work that I do right now, I've had over 20 years of experience working with youth development. And part of that was to help kids in terms of literacy, educating them in many forms but making sure that folks who's unfortunately here in the United States, a lot of young African-American kids, black boys, were not reading at the grade level they should, and there was a direct correlation with that we found, and those that later on had criminal offenses. And so it's very important to introduce, I think, the power of words in terms of literacy, in terms of education. And so, I've been an advocate for that for a long, long while. Now I work with males, black males, helping them to, as they age, to become sage and to start modeling the behavior for younger men, and also to help them move through, the difficult middle ages, as it were, and deal with crisis. So I've always been, very interested in looking at how do we raise a consciousness of a people. And, I'll tell you a little bit more as we talk about how I ran into Peter Gracie and the work that he is doing.
Well, let's go there. How did that engagement come about?
So Peter and I sit on several committees together and organizations together. And on one of the occasions, when I found out that Peter was a poet, I invited him and two other poets here from this side of the diaspora to an evening of poetry. And we just had them go through their poems. And, as it continued to develop our relationship, I discovered that Peter had taken this particular poem, this powerful poem that is now being used across the land, this is Jamaica, and created a scholarship around it. But here's what I've discovered through poetry. Poetry motivates kids at the early level to read. It helps to teach them. It helps to build vocab. It encourages creativity. Poetry can be used as well to improve cognition in terms of just the way kids will think along the way. It's also a portal for expressing emotions. A lot of folks write poetry as a way of dealing with their pain or even their joy. And it serves as inspiration. It can be used in celebration. We remember Miss Lou, how she used her poetry to celebrate the pride and joy of Jamaica and the language and the culture that's so uniquely ours. It's a form of storytelling. And as African people, we're griots. We are accustomed to telling stories. We all raised up on Brother Nancy, right? And it builds community. And I see where this particular scholarship with kids all across the island is building community and raising self-esteem.
Mm-hmm. And having said that, how do you feel about this poetry scholarship competition and what this could mean for even more students? Some have benefited already, but in terms of building this out in a way that it pulls in more children who become more aware and write their own poetry, recite their own poetry, etc., and what that can do for the individual student's self-esteem and other forms of personal development.
Well, one of the first things about this particular poem, it drives home nationalism. And that's important because part of the development of a child or a youth is the idea of sense of belonging. You have to belong to something greater than yourself. And Peter mentions, not once but twice, he mentions God and prayer. And that's an important thing. I know Jamaica, I don't mean being religious and being a zealot, but I mean having a sense of belonging to something greater than yourself, so that when you see others, you see the divinity in them and respect them. I think that would certainly help in terms of the way we treat each other. And this poem speaks to that, drives that home. I think the fact that, like affirmations, the fact that kids are reading this poetry and writing their own and writing poems based on sense of self, whatever that is, having a voice, allows them to deal with some of the mental health issues that oftentimes is suppressed and not allowed to come out. So I think it's an avenue for kids to hear themselves and be heard, and be helped and reached in many areas. I also believe that because it is helping to close the literacy divide, because a lot of kids who are not yet in there but hopefully will be reading their poetry and writing their poetry will get a chance to be mentored, helped, and touched by the teachers who are around them, who see where there are opportunities to help and foster their development.
And you've been deeply involved in so many areas, psychology, social work, education, and it's a lot of work across different areas. Is there one common thread that you have detected running through these various experiences, situations, sessions that you've been involved in across the U.S. and elsewhere?
Yes. I believe that when folks have a personal sense of value, when we are built on values, and the idea of educating a child is not just the parent's responsibility, nor is it just the teacher's responsibility. It's the community's responsibility, and the community is responsible for helping to develop value system. I hope gone are the days, and not gone are the days, when you can speak to somebody else's child in a loving, caring way to say, hey, that is not appropriate, or at least raise that consciousness. I think values are important. The sense of self and identity is important. Who am I? Defining that for yourself, and not allowing the media, not allowing celebrities, not allowing the DJs, not allowing the dance and the music to define that, but to start defining that for yourself. So I found that when kids have a strong sense of value, a strong sense of identity, there is more purpose in terms of how they move and how they live their lives.
Absolutely. And there's the matter of trauma, which we touched on at the start of today's program, because we had that tragedy in the parish of Clarendon. We'll come back to that point in just a moment.
You're listening to Power 106 FM. The time is now
3:45.
Thanks a lot for staying with us here on our very special feature. This is Jamaica, bring both sides of the story here on Power 106 FM. And our very special guest is public speaker, certified life and mindset coach, Mr. Wayne Dawson, as we continue to explore the opportunity to get the thoughts of this Jamaican, originally from right here on the Rock, formerly of Arden and Wolmer's. We're trying to learn from his experience and expertise in broadening the scope of the discussion. So it's been a very sad day here in Jamaica today, Wayne Dawson, because we woke up this morning to news of the murders of a mother and her 4 children. The 34-year-old mother, her 4 children, one 15, another 10, the other 5, and a 23-month-old child. And how do we guard our children? What happens? And this, I don't want to say too much, because the information is still coming in terms of further details, and it's a family member is suspected to have committed this most heinous crime. How does one continue? I'm thinking of family members, for example, surviving family members. How do you go on after such a horrific tragedy? And what of the not just the adults, but in particular the children, who, when they hear what happened, or when news gets to them, how do we help them to cope with this kind of tragedy?
Yes, it's very sad, and my condolences goes out to all the loved ones.
Yes.
And what is happening, unfortunately, is that we're a people filled with trauma.
Yes.
Most of us have had something traumatic in our experience, but we almost normalize it. You go to bed hungry, and we call it poverty, but that speaks to trauma because it's normalized since a lot of people go to bed hungry.
Yes.
It speaks to trauma when you're walking down the street at 14 years old and a grown man of 35 comes at you and you're afraid to walk through that area going to school every morning. That's trauma. And we have to begin to address these issues. We have to speak to it. We have to recognize that mental health should not be a stigma that's negative, but it's a stigma. It's not a stigma. It's a cry out for help. And so when we start speaking that sort of truth and not being ashamed to ask for help and to directing our youngsters and ourselves for the help we need, seeking professional input into how we're feeling. When we move away from the idea, for example, I work with men particularly, that it's not, if a child cries, a young boy especially, you're acting like a sissy, you're going like a girl, you know, what you have to cry for? Dust off yourself. That is so archaic and cavemanish in terms of understanding there's no humanity in expressing that to people. And the idea that we have to put this false sense of manhood and masculinity, you know, is something that we have to address as Jamaican men. You know, I'm as manly as the next man. I will step in and protect and provide for my family, but at the same time, if I feel pain, I must be able to express it and express it with people who I care about and who care about me without feeling endangered. We have to move away from these false narratives, and part of it in Jamaica, and I'm going to say this and probably get a huge knock from the folk that are listening, the music that we had, when I was in Jamaica, there were codes in terms of, you know, men, nothing right about crime, but even if a criminal came to your house to rob you because you were in the drug business, he wasn't going to rape your grandmother. There was a code. And so we've gotten to a place where there is no more respect and codes for ourselves and our community and the people in it. And this is partially portrayed in the kind of music that we allow and escape and celebrate. There's nothing to celebrate about an artist that talks about murder and crime and belittling women. There's nothing to celebrate about that. And so we have to move beyond that level and hold ourselves responsible and accountable and stop playing the game, you know. So it starts with what we allow ourselves to find as tolerable in terms of how we portray our culture. There's no award to be given for being tough and hardcore and bad man. That's something that's really, you know, I want to say maybe all these years of our colonial relationship and slave heritage have brought us to a place where we have been disempowered and impotent for so long against the slave master that finally, when we think we're free, we're beginning to flex ourselves, and we finally feel we have to show how bravado we are. But we need to move away from that and get back to the fundamental of loving and caring for each other, a neighborhood relationship. You know, that's what a neighborhood is, where people, your neighbors, come together and share in a common, I don't mean a garrison, but I mean a common belonging, a common movement, where there's collectivism, there's communalism, there's cooperation, there's collaboration. That is the kind of structure we have to re-engage our communities in Jamaica. And we have to hold politicians accountable. If you want my vote, what is your agenda to make sure that this is happening? And so we have to move away from those kinds of old isms where we vote for you because my family voted for you and the next family down the road voted for you. We have to realize that in instances where we're being played with, where we got to step out.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you talk to kids?
Yes.
By being sensitive, by having empathy, by understanding that if they are afraid, that you have to recognize and validate that fear. It's not shut up, go on, go do your job, go do your thing. It's let me hear you. What are you feeling? Where do you feel the pain? How can I help? And to find help when they cry for help. Because a lot of what you're seeing in terms of the anger, and by the way, a lot of the criminals that are on the street are also in pain. They're also victims of pain. They're also crying out for help.
They've
right?
also been
So
traumatized, yes.
They've also been traumatized.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And when people don't think that there's hope and a future, there's nothing to live for. So why not?
Mm-hmm.
So we have to give people, again, our folk, an opportunity to express themselves and to know that there's something above and beyond the day-to-day struggle.
Yeah.
We have to open a way for folks to have hope. And by the way, again, one of the things is for us to recognize and acknowledge that life is bigger than us. Mm-hmm. There's something beyond us. We're not responsible for how we got here, and we can't count the day on how we leave. So then there's something, a creator, a divine force greater than us that decides that, and therefore we have to find a way of coming in some kind of peace and alignment with that spirit within us.
Yes, indeed. And as you mentioned as well, being able to express, in terms of the children, it does make a difference when they're able to express themselves, their emotions, in writing or in painting, or some other form of sort of expressing what they're going through, what they're feeling, and it wouldn't hurt to apply that in terms of poetry, as we've been discussing as well.
Yes,
it is one of those ways that can be quite offer some kind of a healing or comfort, at least.
Well, this is how reggae came to life.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Bob Marley and the early pioneers of reggae music were expressing life,
Yes.
their pain, their struggles. And poetry and music, well, music is nothing more than poetry set in motion to sound, to music.
Yes.
So there were great poets back in those days too. They spoke of their pain and they talked about it in a way that was empowering. And so it's important that we allow today's youth to have that opportunity as well.
Yes, indeed. We could go on all afternoon.
Yes, sir.
But in the interest of time, we're sure that This is Jamaica, the organization, will be able to call on you from time to time, and gladly, I'm sure you will accept. After all, this is Jamaica, and that's what we do in terms of supporting each other. We're proud of you. We've been reading up on you and seeing the tremendous work that you've been doing as well, and we look forward to having you engage us in discussion over time as we
My
share.
beloved brother Dervan,
Yes.
thank you.
It's been a pleasure.
And to be with Power 106 and your family. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Take care. And that wraps up this week's edition of This is Jamaica. And here's Peter Gracie to take us out in this segment.
This is Jamaica. This is my country. A son of this island, a daughter of this land. Fearless of fear, I stand in awe. Only love prevails, secured in God's hands. This is Jamaica, where joy cometh in the morn, surrounded by mystic waters, crashing upon the shores where only heroes are born. only if you knew Jamaica as well as I do, then you would utter, I love you, Jamaica. God knows I do. This is Jamaica, a simple speck in the universe. Our hearts beat and pulse in every nation, but only second to the kingdom of God. We put Jamaica first. I am Jamaican, regardless of where you may find me. Black, green, and gold is the marrow in my bones. So if I die away from my island, I pray to God you'll take me home.